All right, good morning. We've been talking about the life of Joseph in the Old Testament. This is called Dream Big because if you remember, Joseph was a young man that had dreams, and he's kind of known for his dreams and his multi-colored coat that they made some shows about. But this morning, I want to talk to you about the fact that timing is everything. Timing is everything, and especially when you look at Joseph's life, and honestly, if you take an honest consideration of your own life, this is what I think you'll catch. Timing is everything. I know that we think, no. If I just have this, or if I just do this, and that timing has nothing to do with it, and that's only because we have a tendency to live in the moment. And so we tend to do what we feel like doing in the moment, and we tend to take the direction that we feel like taking in the moment. But absolutely, timing means everything. If you're married, you understand. Timing means everything, right? You can buy your wife a present any day of the year, but you forget her birthday, forget her anniversary. Timing absolutely matters in her life, and it matters in your life also. In the book of Ecclesiastes, it's a famous verse, actually a kind of a chapter that Solomon writes in the third chapter. And in fact, the Byrds, anybody remember the Byrds? The Byrds made a song about this. The song went, to everything. You remember that song. I'm not the only old person here. There is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. Yeah, timing is everything. It comes from Ecclesiastes. And that's exactly what Solomon writes. He says everything has its own timing. Everything has its own time where it's purposeful in that time. And in fact, one of my favorites is he talks about there's a time to be born and there's a time to die. He said there's a time to plant. I was thinking about this yesterday. And there's a time to pull the plants up. Anybody there? Yeah. Because the ones in my front yard are dying. I mean, this heat is absolutely just nailing them. Because I planted them there, they were spring plants, it's the perfect time of the year, they're not summer plants, right? They're not going to make it in there. There's a time to everything. Now, here's where we really struggle. It's in this timing idea, and as a matter of fact, here's where you struggle and I struggle as far as our dreams are concerned. This is where most of the time we really fail with our dreams, and our dreams really, chasing them and staying with them and believing them. And here's your first fill in the blank. Here's where we really fail. It's in patience. Can't believe you said that, I don't have time to listen to that. Patience. See, patience is all about timing. Patience is being willing, to wait. Joseph would say, for God's timing. Because it wasn't, Joseph's life was not just about do whatever you want to do, say whatever you want to say. It's about that God has His own times and His own plans, and if you're not patient, if you're not willing to wait on those things, then what happens is you may say, well, I did the right thing, and then someone would say, yeah, you did the right thing, but you did it at the wrong time. Yeah, there's a time to keep your mouth shut, right? I know you're thinking, this is not that time. Not for me, it's not. This is my one shot, so, and there's a time to speak. There's a time to act. There's a time not to act. There's a time to show restraint in your life. Here's why we struggle so much with patience, because we don't want to wait. I want it now. I want everything to work out the way I want it to now. Listen, there was a time that if you bought Blockbuster stock, you were a genius, right? There was another time if you bought Blockbuster stock, people would say, what is wrong with you? What were you thinking, right? Because nothing works all the time. Nothing it's always the right time for those things. You have to exercise patience in your life. I want you to think about Joseph's life. 17 years old, he's a teenager. He's the favorite son of his father. His father's let that be known to his older brothers. And Joseph has a dream. Actually, Joseph has two dreams. And the first dream was, I was out in the field with you guys, my brothers, binding up the wheat. My bundle stood up, your bundles bowed down and worshiped my bundle. Went over really well with the brothers, right? Because they're older and they're going like, yeah, teenage, oh, yeah, oh, good dream, Joseph, yeah. Let's get outside where nobody's looking. We'll talk about your dream, you know. And then he comes back later, has another dream, and he comes back, and this time he speaks even to his father, Jacob, and he says, hey, I had another dream, and the sun and the moon, which clearly represented Jacob and his mother, the sun and the moon and all the stars bowed down to me. And Jacob's going like, so you think that we're, you know. But this is what it does say also. Jacob thought about it. He contemplated. He tried to deal with. He didn't speak out, but Jacob thought about it. And the reason was because Jacob was older. Jacob had gone through a lot of things in his life, and Jacob had seen this, that sometimes what upsets you, the dream, the idea that upsets you, later you recognize, you know, that was actually of God. It's just that I didn't understand the what? Say it with me, the timing right of it. See, there's a day that Jacob's going to wake up and find out that Joseph is still alive, and that Joseph is in Egypt, and that Joseph becomes the rescuer of Jacob, the family, everything they have. He's their rescuer. And then all of a sudden that dream that occurred, you know, decades before, he's going to say, oh, timing. See, I just have a hard time being patient, don't you? I want it now. God, I want it to work out now. In fact, I will tend to do this. Do you do this? I'll go to the Bible. I'll find a promise. And I'll say, God, you promised, and what I mean by that is you promised right now to do what I wanted. And God does not promise that. Instead, God says, listen, timing belongs to God. Timing belongs to Him. He has His own plans. He has His own purposes. And He gives us dreams to hang on to, and so that we can get through things and we can wait for that time. But what we understand is timing belongs to God. I was reading a book about a guy who's written and put together a lot of stuff from a guy named Peter Drucker. Anybody know who Peter Drucker is? Guru on leadership for the past, 50, 70 years. I mean, he's the guy. And this is what was interesting. It just kind of stunned me and stopped me in my tracks. Couldn't go any further. I'm reading, and he says, Peter Drucker, in the last 1/3 of his life, and then he puts in a comma and puts this little statement in there, which incidentally were the most productive years of his life. I was stunned. I just had to stop and go, whoa. The last 1/3 of his life was the most productive years of Peter Drucker's life. You know why? Timing. Everything that he'd learned, everything that he'd caught, that God had taught him, Peter Drucker was able, at the end of his life, to put those things into practice, to teach those things, to show people things. And what happens is Peter Drucker did not give up on his dreams, on what he saw, what he understood. See, the problem is too many of us, the reason the last 1/3 of our life is not the most productive time of our life is because we've grown weary. And our weariness is because we are impatient. We have lost our patience. Why didn't it occur now? And we've just grown tired. We've given up on the idea that God has plans for us, that God is going to make something happen. You know, we've become maybe angry. Maybe we've just become sort of, dead in our, Patience doesn't mean that you're slothful. It doesn't mean that you're lazy. It doesn't mean that you're not getting anything done. Patience is not just sitting there and saying, okay, God, I'm waiting. Patience is moving and acting and learning and growing and applying yourself and sharpening your skills, knowing that you're going through all of these things and God alone has timing, right? God is the one that will show you why you went through all of these things. I know that we do this, and I understand, I hear people, teach this all the time. Listen, your problem is you're just not praying the right way. If you prayed the right way, you'd get what you want. Your problem is you're just not applying, certain things. If you did, you'd get what you want. See, listen, if you pray the right way and you do the things that God wants you to do, you might not get what you want today, right? You might not. Instead, if you do the things the way you're supposed to, and you believe and you trust God, and you say, God, listen, timing all belongs to you, you will get what you want in God's what? Yeah, in His timing. But it involves patience, and patience is hard, isn't it? So Joseph's 17 years old, man. He has a dream. And all of a sudden, what he thought was going to work out is his dream because he's the favorite. He's going to kind of rule over his family. Instead, here's timing. Instead, it just so happens that some Ishmaelite traders, come by that area when the brothers decide to kill Joseph and change their minds, see Ishmaelite traders going by and say, you know what, let's sell him, we can make money on it. Just so happens he sells them they sell Joseph to these Ishmaelite traders. Here's timing. Just so happens they're going to Egypt. Just so happens they run into a guy named Potiphar, who is the captain of the guard of Pharaoh himself, and they sell Joseph to Potiphar. So he just so happens to be in the household, in the family of someone close to the king. Just so happens that Potiphar's wife takes a real liking to Joseph, and she makes a move on Joseph, but it just so happens that Joseph's going to stick to his principles and who he is because he's still trusting in God, even in God's timing, and even though he knows this is not going to work out well, he says, no, that's not what I should do, because in fact he makes this statement, how can I do this after Potiphar has trusted everything to me? And he says, how can I, see, here he goes again, how can I do this and sin against who? God. Because it's all, for Joseph is learning, it's about timing. And the master, the author of time is God himself, not you, not me. I know that you want things when you want them, but God is the author and the master of timing, and it absolutely involves a trust. Just so happened he's thrown into a prison, which is controlled by Potiphar's house also. Just so happens when he's in prison that the cupbearer and the baker, the chief baker, offend Pharaoh. He throws them into prison. It just so happens while Joseph's in there, they have two dreams. Just so happens that Joseph is able to tell them, here's the interpretation of your dream. Just so happens that the dreams actually come out exactly as Joseph says. The cupbearer goes back to Pharaoh and forgets about Joseph. Just so happens. Still timing. It's still not done. See, here's the problem with me and you sometimes. We just think God has forgotten about us. We think that because timing didn't work out the way we wanted it to, maybe God's not real, Maybe God doesn't care. Maybe God's not worth really believing in and trusting in. And the opposite is absolutely true. This is where we fail most of the time. In fact, when you get jealous, you know what jealousy is? It's impatience. I want what I want. I can't get it right now. I'm impatient. I become angry. It's just a lack of patience that's coming out. Potiphar's wife, she has this desire for Joseph, and it turns into this rage. She's angry because she feels rejected. You know what that's all about? It's about one word: patience. Is God going to give you the desires of your heart? God promises. He doesn't promise to give you the desires of your heart in your timing. He says, delight yourself in the Lord, and the Lord will give you the desires of your heart. Right. In His timing. And His timing is always, always better than our timing. If Joseph had his timing, Joseph would still be in the land of Canaan, and he would still be, with his father and with his brothers. Sounds good. He would still be kind of overseeing things. You think, well, Joseph would like that. He would. But God had so much, He had said such bigger and better plans for Joseph's life. And it all involved this timing. And some of the things that are timing you think are bad timing, but God says, no, it's actually good time. Sounds like a hee-haw show, doesn't it? That's good. No, that's bad. That's bad. No, that's, the old shtick that they used to play all the time. But it's all because you understand and you trust and you believe in God's time. Let me give you just 3 statements kind of underneath that if you want to fill in some blanks. Here's the thing that you have to remember about God, and that Joseph was learning and that Joseph is illustrating about God, and that is that God is timeless. God is timeless. God's not bound by time. God doesn't have to move quickly. God doesn't have to panic. God can play this thing out absolutely the way He wants to, because God is timeless. I love reading science. I like science, and I like, Stephen Hawking is one of those brilliant guys that as he thinks. And I remember when Hawking's years ago, when he was talking about the universe, and he was going back and he kind of worked on this idea that there was a beginning point, and he kind of worked toward that idea. But the problem is, a lot of Hawking's friends are not God people. They don't like that idea, because now that you got to a beginning point, there must be a beginner. So Hawking's had to come back, actually wrote a book, and he said, well, here's the way it works. There are these other dimensions that we can't see and we have no evidence of, but they were the creating thing. And I was like, yeah, brilliant, absolutely. He's called God. He's beyond what we understand. He's beyond time. It's the only explanation. He thought he was explaining it without talking about God. Actually, what he just said was there's no other explanation except for someone who is beyond us, someone who is timeless. When God is described in the Bible as eternal, it means God is timeless. God created time. There was a moment where God said, okay, it's going to begin. What you and I think of as time and life, okay, it begins. And there's a day that he will come up and God will say, okay, now it's at its ending point to everything. There's a season. But God is beyond all of those seasons. God himself is timeless. Now, one of the problems with that is that's why we have a difficult time relating to God and believing and trusting God, because we want to see God only in the time that we live our life. And of course, that means we only want to see God right now, how we want things. But God is beyond those things. And this is why God is always saying, trust me, believe me, just hold on to your faith, because God is the one who is working things out in his own time, right? Here's the second thing. The cupbearer that we're talking about, he forgets about Joseph. He forgot Joseph. But of course, who didn't forget about Joseph? Yeah, God didn't forget about Joseph. So listen, it doesn't matter in life who has forgotten about you. It doesn't matter, who has rejected you. It doesn't matter who has kind of written you off, because God does not do those things. People will do those things, and that really bothers us. In fact, what we do is we live as if those people and those events have absolute control over our happiness and our success and our well-being. But you have to remember, as Joseph remembered, but God is the one who has not forgotten about me. So this is Joseph from 17 years old to 28 years old. This is his life. He's in Potiphar's house as a servant. It prospers because of him. He's in the prison, running the prison that is also overseen by Potiphar's house, and it prospers under him. And here he is at 28 years old. He's given these interpretations of the dreams. They have gone back. They've happened immediately within 3 days. And yet Joseph still sits in the prison. This is where the story picks up in chapter 41. Look at this verse. Verse 1, it says, 2 full years later. Now that just kind of, again, is one of those statements that kind of caught me and it just stunned me. Whoa. 2 full years later. Wow. See, Abraham is a guy that God said, I'm going to make a mighty nation out of you, right? And Abraham says, that's great, but there's one problem. It's hard to be made a mighty nation out of when you don't have any kids. And we can't have kids. And he's 75 years old, and God says, yeah, but I'm going to give you an inheritance. I'm going to give you a child. I'm going to give you, and Abraham's, man, this is a great, because I'm really near the end. 75, I don't even know if I could raise a kid. And Sarah, she's all excited, about God's going to give us a kid. Then she thinks about it, goes, wait a minute. I'm too old to raise, this, so it might not be a blessing. This may be a curse. Don't give me a child now, And so 25 years later, God gives Abraham a son. 25 years later, he gives Abraham a son. In fact, if you know the story, in between, you know what Abraham and Sarah did? They tried to figure it out themselves. Okay, God he's powerful, but he's not that powerful. And, so here, Abraham, take my handmaid and you'll have a child with her. Was that what God promised? Well, kind of roundabout, yeah, and we'll just kind of fix it ourselves. Don't you do that sometimes? Why? Lack of, patience, God's timing. And God, God knows exactly what he's doing. And just because God gives you dreams and promises does not mean that he's going to fulfill them right now. And Joseph is having to learn the same thing. 11 years later, and he runs into this problem of being forgotten about. 2 full years later, it says, catch this, Pharaoh, isn't this a great word? Pharaoh what? Yeah, because even kings of the earth have dreams. Even pharaohs, rulers over everything, internally, they have ideas and things happen, and God is associated with those. And he says, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing on the bank of the Nile River. In his dream, he saw 7 fat, healthy cows coming up out of the river and began grazing on the marsh grass. This was not unusual in Egypt because during the heat part of their season, the cows often go down into the Nile and stand in the water, to cool off and to try to get away from the insects and things, and then they come walking out. So it's a picture that he was used to seeing. But in his dream, these were healthy, strong, fat cows. And then he says, verse 3, then he saw 7 more cows come out from behind them from the Nile. But these were scrawny and thin. These cows stood beside the fat cows on the riverbank. Then the scrawny, thin cows ate the 7 healthy cows. At this point of the dream, Pharaoh, he woke up. And it says that Pharaoh went back to sleep again. He has another dream. This time it's about ears of corn, 7 healthy ears, 7 scrawny ears, and the scrawny ears eat the healthy ears. That's a dream, they're weird, But he's like, I've got to figure out my dream. And so he goes to his wise men and he asks them about his dream. In fact, look what it says in verse number 8. It says, the next morning, Pharaoh was very disturbed by his dreams. Why? Pharaoh's doing the same thing you do. He's thinking about the future. What does this mean? What is coming? If there was just someone who could tell me what's ahead, what the future is all about, just think of how I could prosper. Just think if you knew 5 years from now, what would be the end thing, right? If you only knew the Pokemon game, would just explode all of a sudden. Man, could I have made some money, right? If you only knew, and that's what he's thinking, because Pharaoh knows, just as you know, the future has everything to do with my prosperity, my success, and my happiness. If I only knew the future, which is why we go to people all the time trying to help us, tell us what the future has in store. So he called out for his magicians and wise men of Egypt. When Pharaoh told them his dreams, not one of them could tell him what they meant. This means not one of them would venture out and jump in there and say, let me tell you exactly what this means. So here's what happens. The cupbearer, 2 years later, all of a sudden goes, oh, dreams, wait a minute. And it's really interesting because it just shows real life. He goes up to Pharaoh and he says, at the risk of getting myself in big trouble, he said, about 2 years ago, you were really upset with me. I don't want you to think about it again. I had really offended you so much so that you threw me in prison and you hung the chief baker. But I don't want you to remember that. At the risk of bringing that up again, just want to let you know, when I was in prison, there was this Hebrew slave who'd been thrown into prison, and he could interpret dreams. And he interpreted my dream and the baker's dream, and everything turned out exactly the way he said it. So Pharaoh says, I need that guy, I want to talk to that guy. And so they go, and it's really interesting. They go and they grab Joseph out of prison. It says that they dressed him and they shaved him. So this is in Egypt. This just shows you, historically, this is exactly the way you would come to Pharaoh. He didn't have a stitch of hair on. So if you are perfect, man, for this story, right? This is exactly the way he would have been brought. And Pharaoh says, I want to tell you my dreams because no one can interpret my dreams. And he says, I've heard that you can interpret dreams. And here's what Joseph says, not in me. Can't do it. But God can. And so he tells him the dreams, and both of them. And here's what Joseph says. Okay, it's a double dream. They both mean the same thing. It means there are going to be 7 years of abundance like Egypt has never seen before. Everything's going to work so well, followed though by 7 years of it really isn't going to turn out well. It's going to be really, really bad. Famine's going to be in the land, so bad that no one will even remember the 7 good years. That's how bad it's going to be. And so God is telling you this, Pharaoh, so that you will plan, because it's going to happen quickly. That's why it came in 2 dreams, so that you will know God is going to make this happen very quickly, and you need to plan and store up. In fact, Josephine says you need to take 20%, a new 20% tax, on everything that people have, store up grain, and be prepared for this. And Pharaoh says, man, is there anybody, I love this, this is the question, right? Is there anybody that we could trust to take care of this and to do this during the 7 years of plenty? They have so much integrity, they understand, they have wisdom and everything. Is there anyone out there like this that we could trust with this kind of task, that they would do this and they would take care of this? Because Pharaoh knows this. In all of his group of people, even in himself, he couldn't do it. Could you do it? See, when we have plenty, what do? We live in the now. Can't go wrong. Spend. Waste. That's the only thing about buying in bulk. Have you noticed this? If you go to, one of the stores where you get to buy in bulk, the only thing about buying in bulk is you just tend to waste it. It sounds like a great idea, and you store it, but you think, man, I've got toilet paper to, and let's go roll the neighbor's yard. I mean, it's, it sounds like a great idea. Do you know what I got these for? But we tend to not appreciate it. We tend to waste what we have. And this is exactly what Pharaoh knew. 7 years of plenty, man, food is rolling in like it never has. We'll be eating and eating and eating, growing fat, throwing food over the, balcony. I mean, it's just, and when the 7 years of famine occur, we will be completely caught off guard. Where is there someone who is so disciplined, who is so true to his character, to his core, who's gone through enough training, maybe, who knows, maybe 13 years of training of being in prison and being, who's done this, that they would be disciplined enough to take this task on. And Pharaoh understands, he realizes there is one, and it's Joseph himself. So here's the point that I want to make before I read this, and that is, the third thing is that nothing elevates us. Nothing makes us stronger. Nothing prepares us better than patiently waiting on God. And this is why God asks us to wait. This is why God asks us to be patient. This is why God asks us to trust Him even when it doesn't seem to be working out, that God knows exactly what He's doing. And anytime you feel like you can't do that, just go to Joseph's story. And here's Joseph now at 30 years old. 13 years later, could have looked at it and said, I've wasted 13 years. Not at all. God has just prepared him for this task. Look at verse 38. It says, Then Pharaoh said to his servants, Can we find a man like this, in whom is a divine spirit? Because that's the way Pharaoh understood it. Listen, this couldn't be a normal person. This has got to be somebody that, man, basically the spirit of the divine is somehow on him to take on this task. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, Since God has informed you of all of this, there is no one so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and according to your command, all my people shall do homage. Only in the throne I will be greater than you. Pharaoh said to Joseph, See, I've set over you all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took off his signet ring. This is the thing where he punches his seals from his hand. He put it on Joseph's hand. That means Joseph has the power to make orders, rules, laws in all of Egypt. And he clothed him in garments of fine linen and put a gold necklace around his neck. He had him ride in his second chariot, and they proclaimed before him, this is all of Egypt, bow the knee. And he set him over all the land of Egypt. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, Though I am Pharaoh, yet without your permission, no one shall raise his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. Whoa. You know something? Here's what's really cool. This is not still the fulfillment of God's dream for Joseph. It's not. It still hasn't been fulfilled in his life. There's still more, because it had nothing to do with Egypt bowing to Joseph. It had to do with his own family bowing to him. But Joseph's in a pretty good place, wouldn't you say? In fact, Joseph is given a new name. His name is changed. And near the end of the 7 years of where Joseph is storing up, it says that Joseph is storing up grain in all the cities of Egypt. And it got so that even with his incredible accounting system and all the people that worked for him, Joseph got to the point where he couldn't even keep up with how much grain they had stored. It's what it says. He says they lost track. They kept trying to figure it out, but they'd stored up so much grain and become so wealthy. And Joseph does this. If you ever go after or look at the 12 tribes of Egypt, the 12 sons of Israel, of Jacob, you'll notice Joseph is not one of them. Instead, there are two what are called half-tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim. They are the sons born in the time of plenty to Joseph and the wife that Pharaoh gives him. And Manasseh means, God has made me forget. And this is what Joseph proclaims. God has made me forget the pain, the struggles, all that I suffered, from my brothers and my family. God has somehow wiped those things away. Listen, this now is, he's 36 years old. This is 19 years later, and God has made me forget. Anybody willing to wait 19 years? See, we're usually not. But Joseph is remembering, so much so that he names his son after the taking away of his own pain. And then Ephraim is born, and Ephraim means fruitful. And he says, because God has made me successful and prosperous, and God has made my life a fruitful and a very powerful life. So his two sons, every time he sees his sons, Manasseh, come here. God has made me forget, man. Ephraim, God has made me powerful in the land of my adversaries, in a land that it's not even my land. 20 years later in his life. Then the famine comes, right? And Joseph's wisdom, his power, everything about Joseph's life now is really proclaimed, because everybody was saying, yeah, right, it's never going to be any different than this. It's like 200 a barrel oil, man. We're going to be making money, through our ears, and, it's never going to go down. I had a friend years ago that said, was telling somebody to buy a stock and say, buy this stock, it can never go down. I said, oh. I said, sounds like somebody trying to sell you something. Every stock can crash. Every company can crash, right? We've gone through it where companies that said could never fail. Oh, be careful, right? Because you don't know timing. God alone has the ability to call those shots. He alone determines. And God purposefully sometimes allows the mighty, the powerful, the kings of the world to fail to show who is king and who is God and where you should put your trust. Where's the right place to put your trust? Joseph does this. Okay, let me go through the last part, back part of your outline. Here we go. Why does God want you to wait? Oh, man. Why does God want you to wait? Let me give you 9 reasons God wants you to wait. And you want to hold on to these. Seriously, this will help you a lot to develop patience. First of all, God wants you to wait because God has a wonderful plan. And God's plans don't work out in my timing or your timing. God has His own timing, and God has His own plans. But if you're not patient, if you don't wait on those plans, if you're not busy doing the things God has called you to do, waiting for God to fulfill His plans, you miss them. Second thing is because God wants to show you His great glory. See, Joseph is given an opportunity to be a part of God's story and God's glory. Not Joseph's story, but God's story and His great glory. And God is the one who knows. He's the one that calls the shots. He's the one who gets to determine. And God wants to reveal to Joseph and through Joseph to the world the fact, and this is what He does through Joseph, the fact that God has plans. They are bigger, smarter, greater than any man's plans. God has His own plans. Here's what it says in 2 Peter. It says, don't overlook, this is 2 Peter 3:8. Don't overlook the obvious here, friends. With God, say this with me, one day is as good as and 1,000 years as a day. God is timeless. God isn't late with His promises, as some measure lateness. He is restraining Himself on account of you, holding back the end because He doesn't want anyone to miss it, to be lost, to be left out. He's giving everyone space and time to change. God wants men and women to be a part of His plan. He wants to show them His great glory. Third thing is, He wants you to wait to counteract your natural tendencies in life. My natural tendency is not to be patient, right? My natural tendency is to want it now. My natural tendency is to want justice right now. My natural tendency is to want prosperity right now. My natural tendency is to want fame, right? I was born with that tendency. But if I follow my natural tendency, I will move in the wrong direction. I will miss, because my natural tendency is the here and now, I will miss God and His great timing if I don't learn patience. My dad used to tell this story. It was one of his favorite. When I was a little boy, I got a little boxing set. It was a Joe Palooka. Anybody ever get a Joe Palooka? I don't even know who Joe Palooka was. I don't think he was a real boxer, but it had his name on the gloves, and it was one of those with the little, it was a little metal pole in the bag and a little board you had to stand on, because if you didn't, you hit the thing and the board hit you, So, and I was doing Joe Palooka as a little boy in my living room. My dad loved to tell this story. He says, I was listening to him, and I was announcing myself in the match. And in this corner, right? And I didn't really want to be Joe Palooka, because already someone was that. I didn't know a really good boxer, so my dad loved to tell this. He says, we don't know what his name is. Because I wanted a name, right? I wanted to be somebody. So we'll call him Steve Bradley, right? And, and that's just the way, I thought about, we're just impatient. We want it now. We want some kind of recognition, some kind of, we think it will satisfy us, but God has other plans. It's my natural tendency. Number 4, it gives us time to grow up. And that's exactly what we have to do. We've got to grow up, learn patience, learn that God himself is the one, who has timing. It makes us more productive later in life when we've grown up. Number 5, so that you can focus on your training. See, Joseph spends all of his time learning the skills, the discipline, all the things that he's going to need to run all of Egypt. Because Pharaoh knows, I can count on this guy. This guy's going to be faithful. He is trustworthy. He will do the task. He will make sure that it happens. And Pharaoh becomes rich, off of Joseph's training. Number 6, to build character that can be trusted. You need character in your life. You need things built. God is gracious to you, but God is gracious to build something into your life that that character that God has built into me can be trusted. I can trust that. I can do those things because God has taught me this view of life. This is what Paul writes in Galatians chapter 4. He says, think of it this way. If a father dies and leaves an inheritance to his young children, those children are not much better off than slaves until they grow up, even though they actually own everything their father had. So listen, even though God has called us his children, it means we still have to learn and grow up like every person has to learn and grow up. There is a process. You have to go through it. You don't get to jump from, being born to ruling over everything. Everyone has to go through it. That's what he's illustrating, which was true in their day, just like ours. He says in verse 2, they have to obey their guardians until they reach whatever age their father has set. And that's the way it is with us before Christ came. We were children. We were slaves to the basic spiritual principles of this world. But catch this part, but when the what? It's talking about Christ coming at exactly the right time, but it's also talking about that there is a timing then in our lives because of the fact that Christ came at the right time where we have grown up and we have learned these things. But when the right time came, God sent his son, born of a woman, subject to the law. God sent him to buy freedom for us who were slaves to the law so that he could adopt us as his very own children. In other words, so that we could be real heirs with a real wisdom, with a real trustworthiness in our lives because we've learned to trust God through these things. Here's number 7. Patience. Patience is forward-looking. Patience is not about the past. Patience is about the future, the part that you don't see, that you don't know, that God is going to be faithful in the future. Forgiveness, because this is going to be the major story of Joseph's life when he forgives his brothers. Forgiveness is forward-looking. Forgiveness is forward. You let go of the hurts and the pains. Joseph forgives his brothers. Why? Because he is looking toward the future. And he understands, I'm not going to go back and seek revenge. I'll leave all that to God. I'm looking for the future, and God has built me and given me dreams because of the future. In fact, I put in here the word healing because that's what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is healing is future looking. It's moving forward, not getting hung up in the past or trying to go back and fix past wrongs or trying to go back and get revenge for past things. Healing is future looking. That's where Joseph's going to be. And finally, dreams are forward looking, aren't they? Sure they are. That's the whole point of having a dream. Here's the one thing that I keep questioning in this. Joseph's given 2 dreams. Joseph tells Pharaoh, the reason you're giving 2 dreams is because this is going to happen quickly. But Joseph is having to learn that his dreams still aren't fulfilled. Here he is, 20-something years later, they still aren't fulfilled. Are they really moving quickly? Or, because that's the struggle of Joseph's life, is this patience. So, someone might ask you, why did God give Joseph 2 dreams, and then wait so long? Here you go. Here's the reason. I don't know. I just have to be patient to try to figure it out, right? One day, and that's Joseph. One day he will know why God delayed, why God waited with his dream. Here's what it says in Philippians. Paul writes this. He says, not that I've already obtained it or have already become what? Perfect. Yeah, it's not that I've got there yet, not that I've figured it all out yet, but I press on so that I may lay hold of that which also I was laid hold of by Christ Jesus. Brethren, I do not regard myself as having laid hold of it yet. But one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and reaching forward to what lies ahead, he says, I press on toward the goal of the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. Let us therefore, as many as who are perfect, see it the same way. That means as we have grown up, as we have learned, remember this is Paul writing in the latter part of his life also. Those of us who have grown up and go through that understand it, that he has matured us. All of us, let us understand that. He has matured us. He has taken us to the latter part of our life. If you're in the latter third of your life, God is not taking you to the latter third of your life to sit back, do nothing, make no impact. It is the very opposite that God is taking you to that it is forward-looking. It is future-looking that he has brought you to this time in your life because you have trusted him, you believe him, you look toward him. Now here's the question. What if I'm at the latter third of my life and I didn't do it that way? Then here's the time to start, right? To say, God, teach me a different way to look at life, a different way to understand life. If you just look back at the past and you just hold on to the past and you let the past, if you're not careful, you will let the past make you impatient. You will let the past do exactly what it did to you if you hadn't been trusting him and following him, that as has happened before. You have to let go of the past. You have to look toward the future and say, listen, God has a future. God gives dreams. I'm going to believe and trust him and learn and do what I'm supposed to do now because this is the time that God is going to really use me in life. Let me pray for you this morning. Heavenly Father, we know that you made us to dream. We know that you gave us dreams and desires for a reason, but at the same time, we struggle with those dreams because we want them now. We want what we want. We have a tendency to lose our patience, not to trust you. It brings out all sorts of bad actions and difficult emotions, feelings that we have to deal with. But God, we thank you that you are the God of the future, that you have plans, and that you call us to be people of the future, and that means trusting you, being patient, willing to wait on your timing, knowing that your timing is always, it's always the best. God, give us strength, that we wouldn't grow weary, that we would keep believing, keep trusting, keep learning, keep moving forward. Do the things that you've given us to do today. Love those around us that you've given us to love today, looking for the opportunity that you have given us, knowing that you are teaching us and you are training us because of things to come. And to be like Paul, in doing those things, to strain toward the future, toward his coming. If you're here this morning and you've never surrendered, that's what it is. Never trusted God. Say, Lord, the future is yours. You're timeless. I'm not. The only way my life has a future to it is if you are in my life. It's only because of your promises. It's only because of your dreams and your vision, not because of mine. So, Lord, I want to know you. The good news that God sent his son so that you could. And Jesus Christ came into this world to forgive you of your sins, to pay for them so that you're not carrying them around the rest of your life, so that you can let go of past hurts, past struggles, past impatience, past lust and desires that has manipulated you and led you in the wrong direction. You can let go of all of those things because Christ took all of those things to the cross so that you could live for the future. You could know God and you could know that there's a future for you. God could use you. Lord, thank you for sending your Son. I trust him. I believe him. In Jesus' name, amen.